My name is Joe Prony, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today what I want to do is a continuation off of the show that I tried to do last week, where they were trying to say in this one particular paper that liberalism is more correlated to having mental illness. But their definition of mental illness is where people have more anxiety and more depression, and they actually seek mental health treatment. A couple of things right off the top. I also want to show here that in today's world, if you have anxiety and depression, that's not a mental illness at all. That's actually a very rational response to our world, number one. And number two, if you seek treatment, that's actually a very courageous and a very aware thing to do. And that's not a negative and should never be placed in such a negative area that they're trying to say that it is. So I want to look at liberal unhappiness in general and what it's linked to. It happens to be linked to intelligence, empathy, and awareness. Now I know when we talk about stuff like this, when you mention liberal or conservative, it turns a lot of people off. And I'm not here to be disrespectful, but I'm going to look at this like an umpire would. I'm just going to call the balls and strikes as they are. Now I'm going to look at it from a psychological point of view, which is obviously that there's more evidence that way, but I want to look at it from a philosophical point of view as well. And there you can pretty much think anything you want. So I want to do this in an all-encompassing point of view. So let's start off at the top. High IQ, typically more of a liberal. Now, high IQ correlates to increased anxiety, increased depression, increased ADD, ADHD, asthma, and also allergies. It sounds a little bit weird, but we'll get into it a little bit more. To be more specific, if you have high IQ, you have an 80% more chance of having ADD. If you have a high IQ, you have about an 83% more chance of experiencing anxiety, 108% more chance of experiencing asthma. And here's the one that's really shocking. If you have a high IQ, you have about 182% more chance of experiencing a mood disorder. So let's continue with this. Now, intelligence is linked to liberalism. Empathy and awareness is also linked to liberalism. But here's where the difference is here. Intelligence is not always linked to empathy. We know plenty of smart people that just don't care a whole heck of a lot about others. Now, on the empathetic side, you can be very empathetic, but not super intelligent. So those are not correlated. Now, if you're in the Mensa group, which is the top 2% of IQs in the world, we're looking at an IQ of about 132 or over, 80% of those people are liberals. Again, just calling the balls and strikes as they exist. So the more intelligent you are, it correlates more to being liberal. Now, why would intelligent people experience more mood disorders? Let's start to go down the list. Number one, intellectual overexcitabilities. People who are more intelligent try to look in to figure out the problems around the world, and they tend to see the problems in the world. So they worry a lot more. They also ruminate because they're always trying to figure out what's wrong and how can I fix it. The problem with that is that most problems in life are unsolvable, especially for just your regular individual. Also, intellectual overexcitabilities, we can look at that in terms of hyperactivity of the central nervous system. In layman's language, you're much more likely to experience something like asthma, allergies, and things like this. Now, I can speak to that because I've had asthma my whole life, and I can tell you it's linked very strongly to your stress or your anxiety level. At a very young age, I used to get asthma attacks all the time, but they were very steady on almost the same days all the time, but no one really figured that out. When my parents were divorced, what would happen is I would see my father on Sunday, and I'd see him with his wife or his girlfriend, and then he would drive us home, and I have to go back to my mother's house. That was on Sunday night. Almost every Sunday night, like clockwork, I would be sick. Why is this? Why would a 6-year-old be sick on a Sunday night from just that transfer from one house to the other? Well, fortunately or unfortunately, I was aware enough to start thinking of questions, like a lot of 6-year-olds would. You know, why is my father with this different girl? My father's dropping us off at my mother's. Why can't he stay? So I was already going through all these questions about relationships and things and what love is and all this at a young age, and it drove me into asthma attacks on a weekly basis. I also, before every major test that I had, which, what test is major when you're like 6 years old? But to me, they were all important. I would get sick before test. When I played football, we would play football games on Sundays. So every Saturday I would get sick because I was always worried about being perfect during the game. And so again, overexcitability. I was very aware of me trying to do really well all the time, and it was really important. So it's definitely stress and anxiety related. Higher IQ is also correlated to having a deeper capacity to comprehend your surroundings. So again, higher intelligence can lead to, and often does lead to, higher anxiety. People with higher IQs, they tend to be more health conscious, they tend to be more educated, thus more informed, and they're more likely to seek help. Again, if you're going to do a test to see if a liberal or a conservative has more mental illness, and you're going to go by self-report, you got to go who's going to do the self-reporting. Who self-reports? Typically, someone's going to say, I need help, or this person can't help me, I'd like to go to them. Who does that? People who are self-aware, they're aware of the world, they're intelligent, they're empathetic of themselves because they have self-empathy, but they also have empathy for other people, meaning when they see other people in difficulty, they understand how difficult it can be. So it also makes them much more open to go seek professional help. So again, liberalness is correlated to being intelligent, empathic, compassionate. But also they tend to score lower on what we call the internal locus of control, which leads to unhappiness. What is internal locus of control? A good definition would be is that when somebody believes their success is fully dependent upon their hard work and their effort. Now, I fully say that you need to take responsibility for your life. In order to do that, you have to have an internal locus of control. You have to believe in your heart of hearts that you are in control, that if you work hard enough, you will be successful. You have to think that with every fiber of your being, or else you probably won't be successful. But the problem with that is that it's not actually true. Now, many liberals, they have an external locus of control, which is correlated to making you more unhappy, meaning that you believe that there's outside forces that create a system where you can be successful or not successful. And a lot of times people are lucky when they're successful, as opposed to they just created the success themselves. Most liberals believe that there is a good combination of internal and external control. The ancient Stoics would say that you have to look at the things that you can control and worry about those 100%. But understand that there's a lot of things outside your control that you just can't pay attention to because, again, you have no control over it. So if you have full internal locus of control, you don't worry about the outside world. You believe you can handle it yourself. But that's not altogether accurate. Let me give you an example off the Rotter's locus of control scale. Maybe I'll do a show on it one day. There's a lot of questions. Let's just do one. Here's one of the questions. No matter how hard you try, some people won't like you. That would have it be an external locus of control, which would make you tend to be more sad or unhappy at life. But that's the reality, right? Like, you don't have the power to make everybody like you. That's just a fact. No matter how good you are, no matter how nice you are, no matter what you do in service of other people, there's always going to be at least a certain percentage of people that just don't like you. That's truth. But here's a way to deny the truth But people who deny the truth end up being happier. So the other part of the question would be, people who can't get others to like them don't understand how to get along with other people. So if you believe that it's your fault and you are in control of making others like you, so you put it on yourself that you're in total control of that. That actually makes you happier because you feel like you're the one who's going to end up with the final result based on how you feel. But that's not true. You can't control other people, places, and things. Although the belief that you can makes you happier. So I also said today that we're going to go over some philosophical looks here. So I want to read, I think we'll do four. We'll do 4 different quotes. So let's look at this. By Bertrand Russell. The whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, but wiser men are full of doubts. Now, if we go with the information that I just gave you and look at what he's actually saying here, is that fools and fanatics, who are they? People who have low IQ and people who tend to be religious fundamentalists, right? Fanatical. And they can believe and be happy about their own death because they go, oh, well, this life doesn't matter. In the afterlife, I'll get everything. Well, if you can believe that 100%, it might make you happier. It means you could be on your deathbed and be smiling on your way there. But typically, if you are an intelligent, aware human being, you don't just believe in faith. You need to see some proof, and there's no proof of that. And so obviously you're going to be sad before you die, which would be a lot different. So you can lie to yourself. I think Nietzsche even considered religion or Christianity or churches themselves to be nothing more than going to a bar and getting drunk because you're not seeing the reality of life. But when you do a test to see if someone has anxiety or depression or not, and that's the only thing that you're going to look at to see if somebody's healthy or not, and you're not looking at all the facts along it, you're not going to be able to tell the truth. Because people who are drunk are not seeing reality. People who have too much of a dependence on religion and they think that this world doesn't matter, you can go through pain or be poor and it doesn't matter because God will pay you back after you're dead. If you believe that, it will probably make you happier. Now, if you are certain of yourself, you don't have anxiety. But according to Bertrand Russell, people who are wiser are full of doubts. If you're full of doubt, you have anxiety. Number 2, pain and suffering are always inevitable for a large intelligence and a deep heart. The really great men, I think, have great sadness on earth. That's from one of the greatest writers of all time, Fyodor Dostoevsky, and that one in particular was from Crime and Punishment. Again, what he's saying here, if you have a large intelligence, high IQ, and a deep heart, meaning empathy, compassion, and awareness, you're going to have a lot of sadness. Again, philosophical point of view, but very, very true as well. Number 3, from Jiddu Krishnamurti, one of my favorites. He says, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And again, I agree with this. If you say you have no anxiety or depression, I don't know how human you are. Do you care about your fellow men? Do you care about your own death? Do you care about your own potential? Do you care if you can continue to support your family? Because if you did, you would have a lot of anxiety in your life, and you would be able to deal with it for sure, hopefully, but you would definitely have it. So again, if you say that you're totally happy in this world that we're living in right now, that you are not a mentally healthy person, not in a profoundly sick society. It doesn't exist. And of course, number 4, everybody knows this, ignorance is bliss. Ignorance, again, meaning lack of awareness and probably low IQ equals a state of joy. So if you have less intelligence and you don't see the world for what it is and you don't really care about other people and their troubles and their difficulties, well then life can be pretty joyful for you. Does that make you mentally healthy though? I would say not. Let's continue. So again, empathy and awareness usually brings upon more anxiety, more depression. Especially now when we consider, say, world issues. Let's look at, say, global climate change. Now, a low IQ person would just pass that off that it doesn't mean anything. A low empathetic person would not care as well. So why would that bother them? Why would they have anxiety or depression? They wouldn't. But a person who has higher intelligence, no matter what you do, I don't care what you do for a living, let's say you're not a scientist, but you do know that about 92 to 99% of scientists believe in global climate change, and it destroys the whole Earth. Now, if you're watching a video of a polar bear trying to find food on a little block of ice like this, and you're still denying that there's global climate change, how ignorant do you have to be? But your ignorance is what? It's bliss, right? You don't care. I can look at that and be driven to tears because there's so many people on this planet that are willfully ignorant and willfully trying to destroy this earth, and they don't care. They look at it in terms of, if we do something to save the earth, save the planet, well, what about this guy's job over here? They're not intelligent enough to understand that if we care about the planet, it creates other jobs. And without a planet, you have no jobs. Like, this is really easy stuff. And it drives liberals, or if you don't like the word liberal, let's say it drives people who have incredible intelligence, incredible empathy, compassion, self-awareness, and awareness of the world. Those types of people, this is the kind of stuff that keeps them up at night. And if somebody were to ask them, are you happy or unhappy? Somebody would say, overall, I have to say, or they would say, that their level of happiness is not as good as it could be because the world basically sucks and most people don't care. That's the truth of it. The thing that bothers liberals the most, much more than conservatives, and there's much evidence to show this, is income inequality. Why? Because your typical conservative has, again, internal locus of control. They believe that if somebody's poor or they don't do well, it's their fault, and they get what they deserve. Who cares? But again, a liberal has a little bit of both. They're not black or white. They have gray areas where they can see that, yes, you need to work as hard as humanly possible to get what you want in life. But there's a lot of factors on the other side. Let me give you a factor. Let's say back in 1990, the average house in Las Vegas cost about $100,000, $110,000 or so. It's about 32 years ago. Let's say someone was to graduate college and they wanted to start their life and get a job and buy a house in Las Vegas. Person A had their school and all of their college paid for by their parents. Person B did not. So they spent $110,000 on their education and now they're starting from scratch. This person saved $110,000 just because they accepted money from their parents and they have no bills from their college education. They could literally take that $110,000 and buy a brand new house. Well, maybe not a brand new house, but a house in Las Vegas in 1990 for $110,000 and not take on a 30-year mortgage. You're not going to say that there are factors here that play out that say, okay, this person here had a lot more than this person in terms of starting. So you can't say that who worked harder. A lot of times, yes, most of the time, you have to work hard for what you want. But to think that the people who lose sometimes are not working harder than the people who win is an absolute lie. I mean, is America a meritocracy? That's another thing that liberals and conservatives have a problem with. Because if you believe that people get what they deserve just based on their hard work, you're ignorant. You probably have a lower IQ, you have no compassion, or very little compassion and very little empathy, and you have no awareness of the world, because that's not the way the world works. Let's look at the homeless problem. Again, people who have higher intelligence, who are empathetic, have a real problem with the homeless situation. They drive down the street and they see it and it bothers them. It hurts them to the core. A conservative can pass it off. It's like having a couple of drinks and being totally anesthetized to the world. Why? Because they believe that person out on the corner, they got what they deserved. Because if they worked hard, they would get it. They would get what they need. Is that true in this world? Again, I already showed you one way in terms of a house, how easy it is. If some parents pay for somebody's college, boom, they're off to the races easily. Whereas the other person's taking 30 years to pay off a house. By the way, that $110,000 house in Las Vegas in 1990 is worth probably $500,000 now. So that extra $400,000 that person net worth increased, did they work for it? Easy answer, no, they didn't. They were basically gifted that. That's the answer. Let's take a quick look at anti-vaxxers. Does this bother liberals? Again, if you don't like the word liberal, let's take it out. Let's look at the more intelligent people. Again, I'm not saying that there aren't conservatives who are intelligent, right? 20% of the menses, the highest of the high in terms of intelligence, are conservative. 20% out of 80. But anyway, let's move on from that. If you understand science and you look at the science, again, who's in the hospitals right now? Who are the ones dying? It's the people who haven't got the vaccine. There are literally people right now who are ignorant, unintelligent, low IQ, having no empathy for other people, no awareness of the world. They're doing things like, what did I see the other day? They're nebulizing hydrogen peroxide. They're drinking urine. They're taking horse dewormer. Everything possible instead of actually looking at what all the scientists say. Now, I know people say, well, I did my research. Where? In what lab do you work? Because if you don't work in a lab and you're not an actual scientist, I don't believe a word you say. And I don't even know where you're finding this information. So you have no right to talk. But again, people who are ignorant, they think that they're intelligent. And that's where the problem is. Look up, we'll do another show on the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? That the more you know, the more questions you have. The very little things that you know, you think you know everything. And that's a problem. So it's another reason why liberals or more intelligent, more compassionate people have a lot of anxiety in their life. I could do this all day, but I'm pretty sure that I've offended enough people as it is. So again, real quick, liberal unhappiness is linked to having a higher intelligence and having more empathy, compassion, and an awareness of themselves and other people. So I hope you found this show to be valuable to you. Please put a like on it and subscribe. Thank you.